Can you hear me? Is that better? Okay. Is that better? Okay. Sorry, everybody. We work at the county and we have restrictions on our masks, so it's a little weird not to wear it. The next topic was site. Is that better? Yes. Okay. Thank you. The next is site selection. Why this location? A lot of you said to us, you didn't take into consideration the walking distance that our children take to go to school, and why here? So every site, whenever the county looks at a property for potential development, whether it's for permanent housing or for interim housing, we look at some of the same things that we all, as individuals, look at when we want to buy a property. How close is it to transit? How close is it to a grocery store? How close is it to my doctor? Are there amenities in the neighborhood? Those are the same things that we use whenever we determine whether a site should be considered for interim or permanent housing. And when the government owns property, we don't have to pay for it or source it in the regular market. So if we wanted to buy the same property in the city of Santa Clara, it would cost over $10 million. And that would take away from the money that we can invest in the services. So that was one of the reasons that we decided to offer this as a potential opportunity for interim housing. Next slide. You also asked us, why would you put this so close to other shelters that the county is already running? So what we did is we're showing you two of the existing sites that the county is currently managing, and we wanted to clarify, they are not interim housing sites for a long period of time. The first site that you have here is the Bella Vista Inn. The Bella Vista Inn is being used right now for 2 years. We started moving people in last week for 2 years as interim housing. After that, the project is going to be a permanent housing project that includes units for anybody who's low income and those that are previously unhoused. And so there's 2 phases to that project. It will not be a shelter in the long term, or it won't be interim housing. Clara Gardens is the permanent project that will be there. So I just want to make sure you're aware that is not going to be a permanent interim housing site. So the proximity, you're correct. It's very close to this site, but it will not be the same type of use. On the presentation, there's a link to the project website for Clara Gardens. If you want to learn more about that permanent project, it has already been approved by the city and the developer is seeking funding. Next slide, please. The next site that you all talked about is another site that we're using through a partnership with the Covenant House. The site location is 2250, the addresses are very similar. 2250 El Camino Real. It used to be the Western Motel. That is also a site that is currently being used for interim housing, but it will be converted into permanent housing. There is no project yet. Charities Housing has not completed any community engagement, but that is a little bit farther from the site. But again, it will not be interim housing in the long term. Both of these locations are being used by the county, by our office, and the people that are living in there are not specifically for people that for unhoused individuals from Santa Clara. We have a community queue. It captures everybody throughout the county, and there is no specific targeting of unhoused people from the city of Santa Clara. Next slide, please. Next, I'd like to welcome Sergeant Deeger to come up and share from his perspective what he sees out in your community. He's a sergeant with the city of Santa Clara.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Sergeant Greg Deeger. I am in charge of the police department's community response team. We have a lot of taskings on our plate, but one of the major ones is the response to homelessness and some of the issues that arise from homelessness, so that's why I've been invited out here tonight. I anticipate my role will probably be most felt during the Q&A, so I want to try to keep this brief. But I will say, of all the things that we're dealing with in my unit, obviously the homelessness issue is pretty large. And I think for all of you that live in the city, you can probably agree with that. Whether it's a direct effect or kind of a tertiary effect, we're seeing it day in and day out, right? Some of the observations that I've had, and I'll preface this by saying that I'm just speaking from my own personal observations in this role. I've been in this role for about a year and a half, and have been kind of boots in the ground, ground truth perspective, so I'm not saying anything as an official statement of the Santa Clara Police Department or anything like that. I will say that we are in a tough spot in law enforcement and how we can handle the homelessness issue. We are a little bit limited. There's been some case law decisions in recent years, Martin versus Boise being a major one. The criminal justice system as a whole, some of the COVID impacts and legislation that's been passed that has kind of decriminalized things or lessened some of the penalties for certain crimes. These are all kind of combining to exacerbate the issue, right? And so historically, years past, you may have just been able to theoretically arrest somebody who was homeless for a myriad of violations, and some of those are no longer viable options for us now, right? A lot of what I do in my unit and my partners as well, we have a mental health component, officers that are specifically trained for that. We go out, we always try to lead with compassion. At the end of the day, we are law enforcement officers and we do have to uphold the law and a standard of life, but we do try to always lead with compassion. Try to connect people with services and resources, try to figure out what's making them tick, right, and how we can best help them and serve them. Through these adventures, I will say that I know I tuned into the Zoom on the 13th, and I heard a lot of what you're saying. I myself am a Santa Clara resident, so I empathize with all of you. The homeless population is on the rise in the city, and it's scattered throughout. If I am not advocating for or against, I'm just a reporter of facts, but these folks that are experiencing homelessness are scattered all throughout the community. They're in the creeks. I could get into a long discussion about valley water, but we're capped for time, so I won't. We need some sort of solution. I'm not saying what that solution is, but I think we can all agree, or I hope we would agree, that when we see folks that are either living in a lean-to in the creek, or they're finding shelter in front of a business that's trying to operate, or whatever other situation you can imagine, we want something better than that, right? I know my unit certainly does. We get frustrated when we go out and we offer services and resources, and we're not able to connect somebody with that. Sometimes we get refused. Sometimes they just tell us they're not interested. Sometimes they're so incapacitated from drug use or mental health issues that they can't even make the decision. But those times where we have somebody that's like, yes, I'm at a point where I would like to accept housing, I'd like to be surveyed for housing, and we bring the folks out to get them surveyed, and then they wait, or they go into the queue. That's frustrating, because it would be wonderful to have some sort of ability to have somebody who says, I'm in a position now where I would want to have some help. I'm ready to receive that, and we can just pluck them right off the street and get them on a better path. And right now, that's not what we're experiencing. And that's obviously what we want as a police department for you all, because we want to be able to serve everybody that's in our city, whatever their circumstance. But we also need to maintain that quality of life. It's not okay when I have to go out to a house because there's feces being thrown over a fence into their yard, or somebody's experiencing a mental health crisis and it's potentially putting people in danger, or whatever other, again, myriad scenarios you guys can all think about. We need to have a solution that we can pluck people off the street and get them on a better path. So that's kind of my little 2 cents on it. I am always available to answer questions. If my information isn't on there, I can make sure I'll stick around tonight afterwards. Feel free to reach out to me. I love talking to the community and kind of educating folks on kind of the current situation on the ground. And again, thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Sergeant, and apologies, everybody. We just noticed that one of the slides, when we transferred the presentation over to the computer, we have a map that we developed in response to one of your questions about the proximity of this location to schools, daycare, parks. Unfortunately, there was some issue with when we translated the presentation over. The version that we post tomorrow, we will make sure that it has that map. But it's a great way, this was our way of responding to your questions about the number of schools that are in close proximity. So for community meeting number 3, we will make sure to carve out time to talk about that map. Apologies for that, and thank you, Sergeant, for your honest words. What we're trying to do here is give you the different voices from community members that have to interact with the current housing crisis and the impact that has on people, which means they become homeless. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Greenberg with Life Moves to talk about safety within the building.